Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. We're so happy to have you with us. Let me start out with saying one thing that's clear. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General, should go. He should resign. He has failed the president terribly in this so-called recusal, where he has absented himself. And because of it, Rosenstein, his deputy, has appointed a special counsel who is supposed to find a crime. The crime is supposed to be specified as to what he's looking for. But what has a stripper got to do with Russia? The whole thing is insane. There is no crime. And to raid an attorney's office and seize attorney-client privilege documents is an absolute outrage. And the Attorney General is responsible, and he should resign. Just that simple. Say, Mr. President, I have failed you. I am out of here. And, you know, I don't care how loyal he was in the early days. By recusing himself, he has left the president open to this nonsense. And it's long overdue that the special counsel also be dismissed. He's going far, far afield. If you would please tell me, somebody would tell me, how a stripper or whatever else she was, you know, what was she besides a stripper?
Well,
She's a porn star. How that in any way is impacted by the Russians in the election. And that was what the Attorney General was supposed to appoint a person, and that's what this special prosecutor is about. It's an absolute outrage, and the president said it well. He said it's a whole new level of unfairness. Well, Mr. President, you are the guy in charge. Let's get this monkey off your back and get the thing done and, you know, cut it and get on with life. Okay.
Well, the raid came as the president considers a military strike against Syria after that deadly chemical weapons attack killed women and children this weekend. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy brings us the story from Washington.
President Trump condemned the attack in Syria, calling it a barbaric act that cannot be allowed to happen. A horrifying gas attack in Syria prompted President Trump to warn that nothing is off the table in response to the strike that killed at least 40 people. Chilling images of kids surfaced, victims of the latest suspected chemical weapons attack.
We cannot allow atrocities like that.
Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad denied he is behind the violence, claiming the video is fabricated. Not true, said UN Ambassador Nikki Haley.
The monster who is responsible for these attacks has no conscience, not even to be shocked by pictures of dead children.
The attack took place less than a week after Trump said he wanted to pull U.S. troops from Syria. In the meantime, the soldiers will stay, along with a warning that those involved will pay a big price. Trump also criticized Assad's most powerful supporter, Russian President Vladimir Putin, making it clear he intends to take action.
Does Putin bear responsibility for this?
He may, yeah, he may. And if he does, it's going to be very tough. Very tough.
He'll pay a price if
everybody's going to pay a price. He will, everybody will.
While the president prepared for a meeting with military leaders about Syria, the news came that the FBI had raided the office of Trump's longtime personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Agents took documents, including some possibly tied to a $130,000 payment Cohen made to porn star Stormy Daniels, who says she had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006, a claim the White House denies. The Cohen raid is apparently not linked to the Russian probe, according to the New York Times, but it also said he's being investigated for bank fraud.
They broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation.
Surrounded by top military advisors, Trump lashed out at the raid and special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation, calling it a witch hunt.
That is really now in a whole new level of unfairness.
Today, President Trump is focused on Syria. Last year, he ordered a military strike on a Syrian airfield after a suspected sarin gas attack. But it's clear Assad did not take that warning very seriously after yet again civilians were the target of this latest strike. So now President Trump is threatening more military action against Syria, which is likely to happen soon. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, Washington.
Well, the old dictator of Syria was Hafez al-Assad. He was, without question, a butcher. And what he did in the city of Hama was outrageous. He killed about 20,000, 30,000 people just ruthlessly. Well, his son has been trained as a medical doctor. He's been trained in Europe. The old nastiness should not be attached to him. And yet he's brought a level of barbarity way beyond what his father did. And we've got to deal with that. And it looks like to me, you shut down his Air Force. I mean, if we got Tomahawk missiles, we've got cruisers and destroyers out in the Gulf, offshore with Syria. And it's time just to blast that guy, bomb his palace, bomb his headquarters, and if possible, take him out. He's, as say, reached a new level of barbarity, and it should not be allowed to stand. And, you know, Trump has taken action against those oligarchs. He has really hurt Putin, their funds in the pocketbook, and their stock holdings are being cut as much as half and more. And by taking out those oligarchs, and he's gone after some high-level people. These are the people who are around Putin, and this is going to hurt him a lot more than some of these other things we've talked about. So it's targeted and well-placed. So the president's getting tough, and, you know, I think Americans applaud it. Well, in other news, has your personal information been compromised while you were using Facebook? I'm glad to say I don't, but if you have, tough luck. John Jessup.
Thanks, Pat. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg faces tough questions about what happens to your personal information and the recent scandals involving online political news in his testimony before 3 congressional committees and 2 hearings. Eric Rosales has that story.
The Facebook founder has reportedly faced intense preparations for today's back-to-back hearings on the privacy data scandal. Now, prior to that testimony, Zuckerberg headed up to Capitol Hill and met with Florida Senator Bill Nelson, the top Democrat on the Commerce Committee.
If we don't watch out with social media and platforms like Facebook and the mistakes that they made in the past, then no American is going to have any privacy anymore.
In a PR push, Facebook released Zuckerberg's opening statement on Monday. In it, Zuckerberg takes responsibility for his company. Zuckerberg states Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company. For most of our existence, we focused on all the good that connecting people can bring. Zuckerberg lays out his version of what happened in the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Facebook's steps to remedy the events, stating it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. That goes for fake news, foreign interference in elections, and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. Louisiana Republican Senator John Kennedy says he's concerned Facebook may be too big to fix.
Is it fair for me to give up all of my personal data to Facebook and apparently everybody else in the Western Hemisphere in exchange for me being able to see what some of my high school buddies had for dinner Saturday night? Who owns my data? Do I own it, or does Facebook own it?
So what new regulations could be on the horizon? Technology evangelist Brian Vecchi with Varonis Systems says lawmakers could take a page from Europe, where a new law aims to provide more protection and control for citizens' personal data.
If you're going to collect this information, the personal data of an EU citizen, you need to treat it with respect. You need to treat it like something valuable. You should only collect what you're supposed to, and if you don't need it anymore, you should delete it.
Over the next few days, all 2.2 billion Facebook users will receive a notice titled Protecting Your Information. It will show you what apps you use and what information Facebook has shared with those apps. Eric Rosales, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Eric. While stories like Facebook, Syria, and the Russia investigation grab headlines, the Congressional Budget Office is warning of another quietly growing problem here in Washington. The annual federal deficit will soon cross the $1 trillion mark, and that's going to radically increase the national debt in just a decade. Charlene Aaron has the story.
The new analysis by the Congressional Budget Office projects we'll see the federal deficit rise above $1 trillion a year within 2 years. That's earlier than had been previously expected. The deficits are expected to drive the national debt from $21 trillion now up to $33 trillion within 10 years. The Congressional Budget Office says the new tax cuts will add to the deficit. But even though the deficit is on the rise, Congress doesn't seem to be likely to cut spending. House Republican leaders have scheduled a vote this week on a constitutional amendment to require a balanced federal budget, but it's virtually certain to fail. President Trump signed a $1.3 trillion spending plan in late March to fund the government through September. He said the only reason he signed off on the bill on national security grounds was because it rebuilds America's military and improves homeland security.
I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again.
And the debt problems could get worse. Interest rates are expected to rise in the years ahead, which will make interest payments on the national debt even more expensive and could lead to cutbacks in other government spending, from social programs to the military. CBO Director Keith Hall warns that rising debt raises the chances of a fiscal crisis in the years ahead. And the question is, what will Washington do about it? Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
$1 trillion debt. Pat, this is something that you've been warning about for quite some time.
Well, I have, and the people in Washington don't seem to think that money is available anytime. You know, it's like it grows on trees, and they can just reach out and shake the tree and get some more money. But the day of reckoning is coming. It's going to be tough. It really is, because if the interest rates begin to go up, and they will, I mean, they've been at historic lows, and all of a sudden we're looking at 3%, 4%, 5%, back to the normal of what interest rates have been. So you take 5% of $30 trillion, and you tell me how much money that is, and that's what is going to be coming out of the federal budget. And when it's over, there's not going to be any money for anything else except paying interest, which means that this country, this great nation of ours, is going to have to default on its debt. It cannot sustain this. And before long, instead of being the reserve currency of the world, the dollar is going to be downgraded. And then we will have incredible pain and suffering in this country. It's all coming about, and it'll always come about when people are profligate. And that's what's happening. Our government is just unbelievably profligate. And when somebody tries to tell them, well, let's cut here, no, no, no. Well, you can't cut here. Well, this interest group complains, and that one wants this benefit, and this one wants something else. And the congressmen just pay up. And nobody seems to be standing in line for fiscal sanity, but it's got to be done. And if we don't do it quick, the nations of the world are going to do it for us, and it won't be painful. I mean, painless. It'll hurt every single human being in America.
Is it doable? Is it doable?
What, to stop spending?
No, to fix what's been done.
Well, it is, but it would be a 10 to 15-year project where you start cutting, and bringing things in line. But there's so many interest groups, they want their money, and, you know, everybody wants their money. And, you know, these benefits, for example, the cost of the social programs, you know, the so-called entitlements, are going to go out of sight. And yet the president has said, I don't want to deal with them. Nobody wants to deal with entitlements. But we should add to the age of people getting benefits. Instead of, you know, 65, it should be 67, then 70, and so forth. As people are aging, we could ease that up a little bit. That would be dramatic. There was a commission that did a superb job, and it was just shelved. I mean, it came in, and they just ignored it. And, you know, I remember years ago, the Grace Commission, they did intensive job trying to figure out how to save money on this federal deficit. And it was ignored. I mean, it was just, they give them to the Congress, yeah, thanks, big yawn, and then gone. But Congress is going to have to pay, and it's going to hurt. Folks, it's going to hurt. It really is going to be very, very painful. And if we lose our reserve currency status, and the dollar is no longer the reserve currency of the world, then I just can't describe how painful it's going to be.